In the quiet town of Millbrook, where grey skies often hung low over weathered buildings, Thomas Baker lived a life of silent struggle. At 32, he felt like a ghost drifting through an empty world. The small warehouse where he had worked for 8 years had closed suddenly, leaving him with nothing but a stack of unpaid bills and a heart full of broken dreams. His tiny apartment told the story of his recent life: a few scattered boxes, a worn-out sofa, and walls that seemed to echo with the memories of his failed marriage. Emily, his ex-wife, had left 2 years ago, taking with her the last remnants of hope Thomas had carefully preserved. Every morning, Thomas would wake up to the same routine. He'd make a cup of weak coffee, stare out the window at the rain-soaked streets of Millbrook, and wonder how his life had become so small. The job applications he sent out seemed to disappear into a black hole of rejection. Employers wanted younger workers, more experienced candidates, people with brighter futures. His savings were quickly disappearing. The unemployment checks barely covered his basic needs. Some nights he would count his remaining money, watching his safety net grow thinner with each passing week. The local job center had become his second home, a place of both desperation and diminishing hope. Millbrook was a town that had seen better days. Once a thriving community of factory workers and small businesses, it now felt like a place where dreams came to die. Thomas walked its streets, watching other people move forward while he remained stuck in a painful pause. His mother, Margaret, would call occasionally, her voice filled with a mixture of concern and disappointment. "You need to keep trying," she would say, but her words felt like distant echoes. Thomas knew she worried, but he also knew she couldn't understand the weight of his silent depression. The loneliness was the worst part. Days would pass without a meaningful conversation. His phone remained silent, a testament to how isolated he had become. The friends from his previous job had slowly drifted away, their connections severed by his unemployment and personal struggles. At night, Thomas would sit by his small window, watching the town's streetlights flicker. He remembered his dreams from years ago, dreams of traveling, of building a successful career, of having a family. Now those dreams felt like distant memories, fading photographs of a life he might have had. The local pub became his occasional refuge, not for drinking but for human connection. He would sit quietly, nursing a single beer, listening to the conversations around him. The warmth of human voices, even if not directed at him, provided a small comfort in his isolated world. One particularly cold morning, something inside Thomas shifted. He realized that continuing like this would destroy him completely. The thought of giving up battled with a tiny spark of determination that had always lived deep within him. He pulled out an old notebook, the pages slightly yellowed with age. On its first page, he wrote a simple promise to himself. "Today is the first day of finding my way back." It wasn't much, but it was a start. The town of Millbrook continued its slow, steady rhythm. People went to work. Children played in small parks. Life moved forward. And Thomas, for the first time in months, felt a slight tingling of possibility. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew staying the same was no longer an option. His cat, an old tabby named Jack, watched him from the corner of the room. Sometimes, Thomas felt Jack understood him better than any human ever could. The cat's silent companionship was a comfort in his most challenging moments. As the morning light began to fill his small apartment, Thomas made a decision. He would fight. He would find a way. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he was ready to take a step forward. The story of Thomas Baker was just beginning, a story of loneliness, struggle, and the quiet courage it takes to rebuild a life from nothing. In the small town of Millbrook, where dreams often got lost in daily struggles, one man was about to prove that hope could survive in the most unexpected places. The end. The community center stood like a beacon of hope in the heart of Millbrook, its brick walls holding countless stories of connection and renewal. Emma Williams, a volunteer with kind eyes and a warm smile, had worked here for years, believing in the power of small kindnesses. On a crisp Tuesday morning, she noticed Thomas, sitting quietly in the corner, looking lost and defeated. His body language spoke volumes. shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor, hands nervously twisting a worn-out job application form. Emma had seen many like him before, people broken by life's unexpected challenges. "Would you like some help?" she asked, her voice gentle and non-threatening. Thomas looked up, surprised by the unexpected kindness. Most people in town had stopped noticing him, treating him like invisible wallpaper in the community's landscape. Something in Emma's eyes made Thomas want to talk. He shared his story, the lost job, the failed marriage, the mounting bills. Emma listened without judgment, a rare gift in a world quick to criticize. She saw potential where others saw failure. The community center had a job support program, and Emma recognized Thomas might be perfect for a part-time maintenance position. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. More importantly, it would give Thomas a chance to rebuild his confidence. "We need someone reliable," Emma explained. "Someone who understands what it means to truly need a second chance." Her words felt like a lifeline to Thomas. For months he had felt like a forgotten piece of machinery, rusting away in the corner of life. The center needed someone to help with repairs, cleaning, and general maintenance. Thomas's previous warehouse experience made him an ideal candidate. Emma saw something more, a quiet determination hidden beneath his defeated exterior. During his first week, Thomas worked harder than anyone expected. He fixed broken chairs, repainted old walls, and cleaned spaces that had been neglected for years. Each task became a small victory, each completed job a step towards rebuilding his self-worth. The other volunteers started to notice him. Mrs. Roberts, an elderly woman who came for weekly knitting classes, would bring him homemade cookies. Jack, a retired construction worker, would share stories and offer practical advice. Slowly, Thomas was becoming part of a community again. Emma watched his transformation with quiet satisfaction. She understood that recovery wasn't about grand gestures, but about small, consistent steps. Thomas wasn't just fixing chairs and walls. He was rebuilding himself, one moment at a time. The job wasn't well-paying, but it was more than money. It was a lifeline, a connection to something larger than his personal struggles. Thomas began to wake up with purpose, something he hadn't experienced in years. His mother, Margaret, noticed the change first. During their weekly phone call, his voice sounded different, stronger, more hopeful. "Something's changed," she remarked, relief washing over her worried heart. At the community center, Thomas discovered more than just work. He found understanding, compassion, and a network of support he never knew existed. People who had once been strangers were becoming friends, offering small encouragements and genuine human connection. Emma continued to support him, not with pity, but with genuine belief in his potential. She saw the resilience hidden beneath, his quiet demeanor, the strength that life's challenges had not completely destroyed. As weeks passed, Thomas started helping other community members. He assisted elderly residents with small home repairs, tutored young students struggling with practical skills, and became a quiet guardian of the community center. The transformation was subtle but profound. The man who had entered the center months ago, broken and defeated, was slowly disappearing. In his place stood someone stronger, more confident, reconnected to life's possibilities. Millbrook, a town that had seen many struggles, was witnessing another quiet miracle. One man's journey from isolation to connection, from despair to hope, was unfolding within its modest community center. Thomas's story was far from over. But for the first time in years, the future looked brighter, filled with unexpected connections and the gentle promise of renewal. The end. The local job training program at Millbrook Community Center became Thomas's unexpected classroom of hope. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, he joined a small group of individuals, each carrying their own stories of struggle and resilience. At first, Thomas felt like an outsider. The classroom was filled with younger people, recent graduates, career changers, and individuals seeking a fresh start. He was the oldest in the group, carrying years of self-doubt like a heavy backpack. The program's instructor, Michael Peterson, was different from any teacher Thomas had encountered before. A former factory worker turned professional skills trainer, Michael understood the real challenges of rebuilding a career. His lessons weren't just about skills, but about rebuilding confidence. Skills can be learned, Michael would say, but believing in yourself, that's the real challenge. These words resonated deeply with Thomas. He had spent years believing he was somehow broken, unemployable, a failure. The training covered practical skills, computer literacy, communication, techniques, modern workplace dynamics. For Thomas, each lesson felt like unlocking a door he thought had been permanently sealed. Spreadsheets that once seemed impossible became manageable. Email communication, which had terrified him, now felt like a tool of connection. His fellow classmates became unexpected allies. Sarah, a young single mother restarting her career, would share study notes. Mark, a former construction worker recovering from a workplace injury, became a study partner. They saw Thomas not as an old man trying to fit in, but as a determined learner. Technology was initially Thomas's greatest fear. Computers had advanced so quickly during his years in the warehouse, but with patience and consistent practice, he began to understand. Each small victory, sending an email, creating a simple document, felt like climbing a mountain. The program also offered personal development workshops. Thomas learned about communication skills, interview techniques, and most importantly, how to present himself confidently. He discovered that his years of life experience were actually an advantage, not a limitation. Emma from the community center continued supporting him. She would review his homework, offer encouragement, and remind him of how far he had already come. Her belief in him was often stronger than his belief in himself. During one workshop, participants had to create professional presentations about their life goals. Thomas, typically quiet, surprised everyone. He spoke about his journey, losing, his job, feeling lost, and now finding a path to recovery. His honesty moved the entire class. Michael recognized Thomas's potential before Thomas saw it himself. "You have something special," he would tell him. "Life experience that can't be learned from books. Your story is your strength." The job training program wasn't just about finding employment. It was about rediscovering personal worth, understanding that age and past challenges didn't define future potential. Thomas was learning to see himself differently. His mother noticed the change during their weekly calls. His voice carried a new energy, a quiet confidence that had been missing for years. "You sound different," she would say, her voice filled with hope. As weeks turned into months, Thomas's skills grew. He learned digital marketing basics, understood modern communication tools, and began to see technology as an opportunity rather than a threat. The man who once feared computers was now creating professional presentations. The community center became his second home. What started as a place of last resort had transformed into a space of personal growth and unexpected opportunities. Thomas was no longer just surviving. He was actively rebuilding his life. His fellow trainees became more than classmates. They became a support network. They shared job leads, offered encouragement, and celebrated each other's small victories. Thomas, once isolated, was now part of a community of hope. The barriers Thomas had believed were insurmountable were crumbling. Age, technology, self-doubt, these were no longer walls but challenges to be navigated. He was learning that personal growth had no age limit. As the training program approached its final weeks, Thomas felt a transformation he could hardly explain. He wasn't just learning skills, he was rediscovering himself. The quiet, defeated man who had first walked into the community center was disappearing, replaced by someone stronger, more confident. Millbrook was witnessing another quiet miracle, a man breaking through barriers, rewriting his own story, one lesson at a time. The end. The youth center buzzed with nervous energy on that crisp autumn morning. Thomas stood before a group of 12 teenagers, his hands slightly trembling but his eyes filled with unexpected determination. These were not typical students. They were young people struggling with life's harshest challenges, poverty, family problems, and a growing sense of hopelessness. Michael from the job training program had recommended Thomas for this special mentorship program. "You've got something they need to hear," he had said. Thomas wasn't so sure. What could a 32-year-old who had recently rebuilt his own life offer these young, frustrated souls? Jake, a 16-year-old with angry eyes and defensive posture, sat in the back of the room. His reputation preceded him. Multiple school suspensions, family troubles, a reputation for being impossible to reach. Thomas saw something familiar in Jake's eyes, the same pain of feeling abandoned and misunderstood that he had experienced. "I'm not here to lecture," Thomas began, his voice steady. "I'm here to share a story." He spoke about his own journey, losing his job, feeling worthless, struggling to find hope. The room, initially filled with skeptical teenagers, slowly grew quiet. He shared his lowest moments without sugarcoating them, the financial struggles, the loneliness, the moments when giving up seemed like the easiest option. But he also shared how he found his way back, through small steps, community support, and believing in himself. Jake, who had initially been slouching with obvious disinterest, now sat up. Something in Thomas's story was hitting close to home. The raw honesty was unlike any lecture he had heard before. During the workshop, Thomas introduced practical life skills. But more than skills, he offered something more valuable, genuine understanding. He knew what it meant to feel like the world had given up on you. These weren't just lessons, they were lifelines. One exercise involved creating personal goal maps. While most mentors would have given generic advice, Thomas approached it differently. He sat with each teenager, listening to their individual stories, helping them see possibilities where they saw only obstacles. When it was Jake's turn, something unexpected happened. The tough exterior cracked. He shared his dream of becoming a mechanic, a passion hidden beneath years of defensive behavior. Thomas listened without judgment, offering practical advice about trade schools and apprenticeship programs. The youth center staff watched in amazement. Jake, who had been considered nearly unreachable, was engaged. Thomas wasn't lecturing, he was connecting. He understood that these young people didn't need another authority figure. They needed someone who genuinely believed in their potential. During a break, Jake approached Thomas. "How did you get through it?" he asked, his voice vulnerable. Thomas shared a simple truth, one day at a time, and by accepting help when it's offered. The workshop became more than a training session. It was a moment of transformation. Thomas was helping these teenagers see beyond their current circumstances, showing them that setbacks were not final destinations, but temporary stops on a longer journey. Emma from the community center watched quietly from the back of the room. She had believed in Thomas when few others did. Now she was witnessing the full circle of his recovery, from a man who felt lost to someone helping others find their way. By the end of the day, something had shifted. The teenagers looked different, more hopeful, more engaged. Jake had begun researching local mechanic programs. Others were discussing their dreams with newfound enthusiasm. Thomas realized he was experiencing his own turning point. His personal struggle wasn't just a story of individual recovery, but a tool to help others. The pain he had experienced was now becoming a source of strength and connection. The youth center director approached him after the session. "We'd like you to continue working with our at-risk youth program," she said. Thomas, who months ago felt unemployable, was now being offered a meaningful role in supporting young people. As he left the center that evening, the autumn sun casting long shadows, Thomas felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of true purpose. His journey of recovery was no longer just about himself, but about creating hope for others. Millbrook was witnessing another quiet miracle. A man who had rebuilt himself was now helping others rebuild their lives, one honest conversation at a time. The end-own year had passed since Thomas's life began to change. The man who once felt invisible had become a beacon of hope in Millbrook, his transformation touching lives in ways he never imagined possible. The youth center had officially hired him as a part-time mentor and skills trainer. Jake, the troubled teenager from his first workshop, was now completing a mechanic's apprenticeship. Every month, Jake would visit Thomas, sharing updates about his progress, their connection growing stronger with each conversation. Thomas's relationship with his family had healed. His mother, Margaret, no longer worried constantly. During their weekly calls, she heard joy in his voice, a sound she hadn't heard in years. His ex-wife, Emily, hearing about his transformation through mutual friends, reached out with a surprising message of congratulations. The community center had become more than a workplace. It was his second home, a place where he felt valued and needed. Emma continued to support him, often saying he was the perfect example of how second chances could transform lives. His job training skills had opened unexpected doors. Thomas began helping other long-term unemployed individuals, sharing strategies and hope. He understood better than anyone the challenge of rebuilding a life after feeling completely lost. Local businesses started recognizing his work. The town council invited him to speak at employment workshops. Thomas, who once feared public speaking, now stood confidently sharing his story of recovery and resilience. His living situation had improved. A small but comfortable apartment replaced his previous cramped space. The walls were now decorated, with photographs from community events, certificates of achievement, and thank-you notes from people he had helped. Technology, once his greatest fear, became a tool of connection. He could now confidently use computers, create presentations, and even help others learn digital skills. The man who once felt left behind by changing technologies was now helping others navigate them. Michael from the job training program often referred to Thomas as a success story. He didn't just rebuild his life, Michael would say, he created a new purpose. These words meant more to Thomas than any financial success ever could. Jake's transformation continued to inspire him. The teenager was now top of his class in the mechanics program, crediting Thomas for believing in him when no one else did. Their mentorship had become a powerful example of how genuine support could change lives. The community began seeing Thomas differently. He was no longer the quiet, lost man they had known. He was a symbol of hope, proof that age and past challenges didn't define a person's potential. His work with at-risk youth expanded. Thomas developed a mentorship program that connected experienced professionals with young people struggling to find their path. The program became a model for other towns, showcasing the power of genuine human connection. Financial stability returned, but Thomas understood now that money was just one part of a fulfilling life. Purpose, connection, and the ability to help others. These were the true measures of success. Emma organized a special celebration at the community center to recognize Thomas's contributions. Friends, former students, community leaders all gathered to honor his journey. Jake gave a powerful speech about how Thomas had changed his life, bringing tears to many eyes. As he stood before the crowd, Thomas reflected on his journey. From a man who felt completely lost to someone making a real difference, his transformation was complete. He had not just rebuilt his life, he had discovered a deeper sense of meaning. The small town of Millbrook had watched his entire journey. What started as a story of personal struggle had become a testament to human resilience. Thomas represented hope, proof that it was never too late to start again, to find purpose, to make a difference. His story spread beyond the town. Local newspapers featured his journey, inspiring others facing similar challenges. Thomas became a living example that personal recovery was possible, that one person's transformation could create ripple effects of positive change. As the evening of the celebration wound down, Thomas looked around the room. Faces of people he had helped, friends who had supported him, community members who had believed in him. He realized his greatest achievement wasn't professional success, but the connections he had made. The quiet man, who had once felt invisible, was now a cornerstone of his community. Thomas Baker's journey was a powerful reminder that hope could emerge from the most unexpected places, that resilience was a choice made one day at a time. The end.